Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Inky Thoughts podcast. Today is actually second time in a row, a very self-indulgent episode where I've invited yet another, not just idol of mine, but also a sociologist on the podcast once again. And this time, I can't actually count how many times I've referenced this person's work when I myself was trying to research tattoos through my academic career. She's written extensively on it. One of my favorite books, actually, right here, is called "Covered in Ink," and it's done by her on the, I would say, it's section between female identity and tattoos, and how tattoos fit into the modern female identity, I would say, and how you embody that, and perhaps also how you rebel against some of the patriarchal values that are pushed against you as a woman as well within society. I'm probably butchering some of it. It's been a while since I gave it a thorough read. But before I ramble on too much, I would love for you to introduce yourself, Beverly.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with you today. My name is Beverly Yuen Thompson. I'm a professor in upstate New York, a sociology professor. And so I love to study so-called deviant subcultures. And, I grew up in the 1990s in the Pacific Northwest in the US. And so that was kind of ground zero for tattoo culture, 1990s Washington State, punk rock scene. So a lot of your guests have had that intersection of this music, punk rock background. So definitely coming out of that. And, one of my best friends when I was 19 was a tattoo artist. So I
Ooh.
started getting tattoos when I was 17. And luckily I went to really good artists from the very beginning
Oh,
and,
yeah. Yeah,
had
because you
my
do hear
own
horror
interests.
stories with teenagers and who they go to. So that's
Exactly. I
a
got
good
into
struggle luck.
a legit shop but I somehow they didn't card me back then. So I was able to get under the 18-year-old age, and that's the tattoo I'm currently having lasered off my body as well. So
I mean, that is often how the story goes with
yeah.
especially
Good
pre-18
shop. It was a
tattoos.
bad tattoo though.
I mean, even some of the really great tattoos I've seen done where people have gotten them and they were way too young, they for
Yep.
some reason or other decide that that's not no longer something to identify with and get it,
Yeah.
lasered and covered and stuff like that. So I mean, it's
And
just a
I
part.
opened
It's
the
all a part
book
of it.
as well with that story too. The
Yeah.
publisher wanted some personal stories. So each chapter is kind of opened with a personal story
Mm,
related to that topic. A lot of tattoo literature focuses on the imagery, the design,
mm.
why did you pick that image? But I'm focusing more like on the tattooed body in culture, like in the workplace, in the family, on the street, and especially gender. So that was, yeah, that book and definitely my personal interest in the topic.
Well, that's what spoke to me about it as well, because I myself got quite tired of how a lot of social scientific research into tattoos hyper focuses in on trying to read something out of an image or
Mm.
what the tattoo looks like and stuff like that, instead of actually focusing on what it means to the person to be tattooed,
Mhm.
which I also find way more interesting rather than what tattoos they have or what style it is or what symbolism they put into it. That, of course, that can also be very important, but far more interesting, like you say yourself, is how this fits into their sense of self, what it means to their social interactions, all this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. How it changes you, how you see
Yeah,
yourself and how you engage with others.
absolutely. And I think, speaking of personal stories in this book, a person I myself am happy to be connected with on social media nowadays, but I always felt like became this legend for me because of your work, was Kari Barber, the tattoo
Oh,
artist.
uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, in Los Angeles. Yeah. Yeah, at that time, she had four shops and a lot
Mm.
of women and queer folks, people of color, at the shop. So that was really cool.
She was very ahead of her time with that,
Yeah.
to be honest. She was sort of paving the way for this, for sort of making more room for the diversity that exists within the two world more visibly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because it's hard to get into a shop. So if you're a woman trying to get into the industry, you might want to get into a, woman-owned shop and there's just fewer of them, but she
Hmm.
provided a lot of opportunities for sure.
I always wonder if she might have known my well, deceased but former friend Erica.
Oh yeah,
Stanley,
your
because she was
artist.
quite cool, and she was also among one of the big ones in LA back in the 80s and the 90s when it
Oh,
came to
perfect.
tattooing.
Yeah.
So you sometimes wonder if they might have met each other somewhere. I would imagine they could have,
Yeah,
but
I
I
would
never got a
imagine.
chance to show her your book or to ask her about that because it would have been cool to do.
Yeah. And my book, I started filming and I was making a documentary also.
Mm.
And it's interesting because it was before this whole Zoom culture and before, I started in 2007. And so I interviewed every person in person. Like I flew to LA with my camera, went to her shop, met her people in person. And so that's a different time than doing research nowadays, where I would probably
Mm.
do a lot of interviews on Zoom. So I
I'd
really,
imagine so.
yeah,
But it
walked
also
into
it just
those
adds
spaces.
another layer to it because there's clearly also an awareness you show in this book, especially about both your own body and the body of the people you're talking to, and how you
Yeah.
each sort of perceive each other's tattoos and tattoos around you and other people around you and stuff like that. I don't think that can be done in the same way without it being in person.
Yeah. And just being in the space, in the
Yeah,
shop, what does it
yeah,
sound like? The other people that are in the room. Because, off camera, behind the camera, when I'm interviewing these women, are somewhat, are men, male tattoo artists who might be kind of pissed off that I'm there, like interviewing the lowest person on the totem pole, and
yeah.
that, they're passively aggressively, like, playing music or making noise or
Mhm.
I'm just like, that's part of the context. I mean,
Yeah,
most of them were great, and most of them brought,
yeah.
their wives and girlfriends for me to talk to, and were supportive and stuff, but not everyone. But
There
it is
were
like
there were some
their
bad
spot.
apples in the bunch as well.
Yeah.
But it does make me wonder, how do you sort of compare that time to now when it comes to women and other non-cis male folks stepping into the tattoo scene? Because I know from speaking
Yeah.
to you before and us having known each other for a while, you're also quite interested nowadays in queer tattooing and that.
Yeah, 1 year ago, in October 2023, there was this conference called Queercation, and it brought together queer and artists of color into New Mexico, where we all got to meet each other and have workshops and stuff like that. So I'm in the process of interviewing those folks, and it just shows like how things have changed. So first of all, just that, yeah, you have internet, you have Instagram to advertise, because before you had to walk into a shop, look at photographs, in a portfolio to find your tattoo artist. We didn't
Yeah.
have internet. We didn't, or I mean, we didn't have Instagram and stuff like that.
I mean, it
And
is
yeah,
wild how
so
even with the
far.
internet existing back in 2008, 2009, that was how I started getting tattoos. You still had to, as you're saying, go into a studio often and have a look and
Yeah.
like, and if you're very nervous like I was, you just like hear somebody say that place is okay, so you just go there and get a tattoo
Right. It's
because
scary to
you
walk
don't
in
dare
too.
go around, as a young skinny nerd and be like, hey, can I look in your book? Okay, no, okay, I'm gonna go.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm just like, now there's just a lot more, diverse people and artists.
Yeah.
They can start up their own shop. They can connect with each other better. They can
Mm.
travel, you could go
Yeah.
across the country to work with an artist, to have that opportunity. So it's really great to hear this next generation, because I was interviewing people that started in the 80s and the 90s, like the old school. And so to hear these new stories, they're different, they
Yeah.
don't have that kind of hazing apprenticeship and
Oh, yes.
all this kind of hostility. They can find their people, and even have shops that specialize in certain,
Yeah.
maybe clientele or certain artwork or stuff like that. So things are a lot more open, but at the same time, like, there's more artists, it's more competitive. It's hard to make money and support yourself in this industry too.
Well, I do at least feel that a positive thing that's come out of this is exactly like you say that it is easier for people that don't fit into the like heteronormative sort of gender categories to step into the tattoo world now as well, and also just women themselves have an easier time, breaking into the industry
Yeah.
nowadays. Not that it's completely without any trouble or hassle or anything, but it
Yeah.
is it is improving quite a lot, and I find it quite refreshing that you can find people like Oba Jackson, who I had on here, who has a black and very queer friendly tattoo studio, you know,
Hmm.
and it's going fucking really well and it's running smoothly and everything.
Yeah.
That's really cool to see because you couldn't imagine that even back in the early 2000s, anybody having a an openly queer studio without any trouble or any
Yeah. Yeah,
harassment, actually.
definitely. Right. And yeah, and like I can't imagine there's if you want to tattoo, other queer trans folks, like there's also that's not enough clientele, to keep a business afloat. So you really do have to have some kind of mainstream production as well.
Yeah, I would imagine so. You would have to be incredibly popular within that community and attract a majority of the clientele, I would imagine, if you survive solely on a marginalized group.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes, that would be the challenge.
Absolutely.
Oversaturation of the market is definitely going to be the challenge now, I guess.
I mean, I imagine so. I feel sometimes there's differing voices within the tattoo community and the industry. It seems some seem to think it's absolutely possible to earn money as a tattoo artist right now, while others seem to believe there's always going to be plenty of clients for everybody.
Mhm.
And I fall a bit in between. I think it depends very much on where you are in the world as well and how you go about
Yeah. I
running
think
your
future
business.
research should look into these kinds of
Oh,
questions
yeah.
because I don't think that we have really talked about as in academic literature about like how much money do you make? How do you have a retirement plan? Do you have health insurance? Like these kinds of details of the business. And
Yeah,
so
there's
maybe
not really a lot of
someone,
research done on that on the business side of how
yeah,
what it takes to run a studio or how they handle these economic hurdles and that, especially in countries like the US where there's private payer healthcare and all that stuff. There's a lot of problems to think about
yeah,
and
exactly.
working in an unregulated business as well. Like I can't imagine the stress some tattoo artists must feel trying to navigate all this.
Right. Yeah. Like, yeah, similar to the gig economy then.
Yeah. Or,
Independent contractors.
yeah, I mean, yeah, they very much as Dustin actually, who you also interviewed
Yeah.
for your own
Yeah.
show, talked
Exactly. I'm
about.
fresh thinking of his book. Did you
Exactly.
already interview him yet, or have
Yes, yes,
you?
yes. I did
Oh, okay.
earlier this week. Uh,
Oh, fantastic. Okay, yeah,
Very
then
cool.
he's fresh in both of our minds. So, because we
Yeah,
were talking about those kinds of details
yeah,
of
absolutely. But it was
becoming a
so funny because
profession artist.
we also talked about how it's paycheck to paycheck and even client to client sometimes money
Yeah.
wise for some tattoo artists, which is dreadful to think about because there's no protections or anything to help them out if they
Yeah.
run out of revenue.
Right. So imagine, yeah, a tattoo conference where tattoo artists are educating each other and they're talking about how to set up a retirement fund, how to save, 20% of your income, how to have the best health insurance and or just, the physicality of the job. This is
Mhm.
causing problems into your body that you might have chronic illness from later, the positions you're sitting in 8 hours a day.
I mean, there are people doing this, but they are doing it privately. It's like these self-help counselors and mentors often advertising their wares through social media. Anything
Uh-huh.
from like a tattoo tax guy out there. Uh, Ryan Choi is this big guy that helps a lot of people. I think it's Ryan Choi. Helps a lot of tattoo artists sort of get to earning more money, but that sounds very much like, the
Yeah,
classic like you want to earn a six-figure
right.
salary,
The
like.
digital
But there are a
nomad.
lot of this stuff popping up, and then there's also other people just trying to help more artists learn better hygiene, better sanitation, how
Mhm.
to make it safer and more sustainable without, promising them, mountains of fucking cash and stuff like that. But it does seem to be popping up and becoming a bigger issue within the tattoo world. This idea of like, okay, so how do you do your taxes properly? How do you
Yeah.
make sure you're
Run
insured?
your
How do you get
business.
your family insured and all that? It's often from a very American-centered point of view. So I guess that's why that
That's
sort of
true.
colors a lot of the
Yeah.
conversation. Because, for example, getting health insurance is not really
Right.
a problem for most tattooers around the world. That's just not a thing, really.
Yeah. Wow.
But it is very much a thing for the American crowd. Uh,
Yeah, and the academic literature is also discriminatory towards tattooing. Like I
yeah.
was telling Dustin in my interview with him that I had sent an article about the legal regulations of the tattoo industry to
Yeah.
a journal that focuses on occupations. And they just desk rejected it and said, this isn't an occupation. So it's
What?
hard to get past that to treat tattoos
Man.
like in the Journal of Occupations or in the workplace, so
Yeah, it's
just
wild to think that still happens, but
focus
that's what I've also tried to tell people now and then, that there's still discrimination in academia towards people
in
wanting to do
academia.
research. Even though we've gotten rid of a lot of the automatic negative bias done in a lot of the research, a lot
Yeah,
of the
right.
publishers are still very discriminatory about research
Yeah.
into tattoos.
Yeah, because I did actually pitch that tattoo professor book to a
Yeah.
publisher and they shot it down. So, well, yeah, we're not quite
No,
totally,
no, we're not out
especially
towards.
not in academia. Like
No, no, no.
academia is probably one of the, I don't see a lot of tattoos, but I'm kind of at a private school that's more conservative.
I did see a fair few when I was in Glasgow, but
Okay.
for example, in Denmark, you'd probably get warnings about wanting too many tattoos if you want to go up through the ladder in academia. I certainly did when I was at the University of Copenhagen doing my master's degree.
Uh-huh.
Both more subtle and more direct warnings about, hey, if you want to go anywhere up the ladder in academia, you might think about how you look and your appearance with tattoos and stuff like that,
That
which
would
is
be great.
wild to think
Are
about.
you thinking about interviewing more like Europe-based folks, I assume then?
I'll
Or
see about
any
it.
everyone?
It's sort of who comes to mind and who has something interesting to say. Europe is weirdly culturally conservative often around these things,
Okay.
especially within the higher ups. So it's difficult to find
Yeah.
anybody with anything they are either willing to say or that goes beyond the old school sort of 90s opinions about
Yeah.
tattoos within academics. So yeah, it's sad to say, but most of the more interesting opinions in these matters come from the UK and the US and Canada and places like that,
Hmm.
which sort of shows a bit of the climate around it, I would argue.
Yeah, definitely.
But to go a bit back to the topic I wanted to talk to you about today, about women and tattoos. Have you seen any notable changes in how women use tattoos today?
I think it's just getting more and more popular so that it's
Mm,
and less stigmatized, basically, because I started in 2007 and now it's, yeah, a long time later. So things have definitely changed a lot. Just the prevalence of shops, the prevalence of female tattoo artists, and then just everyone, more and more
mm,
folks have tattoos. I do think that there is kind of a drop off, maybe like it's already
mm.
hit the peak years ago and that folks are maybe less tattooed.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. And I am kind of, in all the different regions in the United States, it's somewhat different. And then the different
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
social class and all of that. So I'm definitely in my little, niche life and I don't see outside of it enough. Like the West Coast seems a lot more, tattooed and
Yeah,
open to
yeah.
that in the East Coast and stuff like that. But
That
I
is the
think, yeah,
impression
it's
I
just
get from across
more,
the pond as
yeah,
well. That yeah.
yeah, definitely a bit more uptight on the East Coast. But
Mm,
just, yeah, it's more and more popular and accepting. But there is, yeah, a social class still
yeah.
barriers and then professional hierarchies and stuff like that. And professional workers might have lots of tattoos, but they just might hide them more as well.
Yeah. I think that's very true that there is still so many old lingering stigmas and prejudices are still around. So people are kind of careful at times with how they
Yeah,
present
like
their
medical
tattoos.
doctors, professors, suits, politicians, even, folks running the countries, judges, those kind of most elite professions, and even just probably elite spaces like in academia.
Ah, absolutely. But I was thinking because oftentimes when I talk about women in tattoos, my mind often goes to your work. And there was a conversation I had years ago with a Spanish Australian tattooer I know, where she often talked about how she's very fed up with something you talk about in your book, and mentioned a bit in your book and other works as well, but how a lot of women sort of seek permission from men they're with to get certain tattoos or certain placements.
Right.
And she had a lot of very fed up with this idea of like the female tattoo and like imagery that's coded as feminine because she's very aware of the social construction of that. I tried to explain to her
Yeah.
where she thought she really wanted women to get more big and bold tattoos, but I do think that is changing a bit.
Oh
Just
yeah,
from
definitely.
noticing the landscape around me, that there are more women getting more bold tattoos and more tattoos in general. Whereas it did seem to be very much the case when you read some of the literature from the 90s and the early 2000s, especially, that women were very much like it was seen as, oh, you get small tattoos here and there,
Yeah.
but nothing too big. That becomes masculine, but it's a full sleeve. Like that's
Yeah,
always seemed like the
exactly.
idea.
That was my distinction in my book because a lot of
Mm,
art academic articles focus on like you either have one tattoo or no tattoos. But I wanted to make the distinction of like the heavily tattooed women
exactly.
because as a woman, yeah, if you keep it small, cute, and hidden, those are the key terms,
Mm,
then that's more acceptable. So it's when you violate those norms and
yeah.
that it's, large and uncute and visible and that you start to and you've crossed that line of being appropriate because you get social sanctions, so people are
Yeah.
staring at you saying rude comments on the street in public and stuff like that. And so those are the women that I focused on, are people that have crossed that line and they receive social sanctions in their life.
Yeah, but that's what I loved about your book as well, and about a lot of your work, that it is about these people that have gone the step further,
Right.
instead of, because I think it still holds some truth to it today, because most people you see around that don't go heavily into the tattoos, that don't really get into it and enthusiastic about them, just get a few. And for those people, it still seems, at least as I experience it, to be the norm that those women that fall in that category often just get a few they can hide
Mhm.
because they don't want to step outside of this. They don't want to cross that boundary and break the norms and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
They can, yeah, if the tattoos like are about your children, stuff like that, then that's very acceptable.
Well, it seems very much like men don't have the same kind of gatekeeping norm-wise, like that they can just, it almost seems expected that men go out and get a half or full sleeve sometimes, even
Well,
if they're
men
not
have the
necessarily.
other boundaries, like they can't get, feminine tattoos. A
Oh
man can't get a
yeah.
small, cute, delicate tattoo that's visible.
It's funny because I was talking to a mate about it as I caught myself thinking about this. It's not going to change my opinion on it, but I was at a tattoo convention and I kept thinking to myself while I was explaining to a guy why, oh, this artist is awesome, but I wouldn't get her work. And I kept saying the word is too pastel for me. And then I caught myself thinking, why is that too much? Oh, it's because
Yeah.
I find it personally too feminine, but it's still, getting caught sort of in that norm of like, oh, pastel colors seem
Yeah.
so
Or what if a
soft and
guy,
so like.
had a tattoo in a certain, body location that's
Yeah.
associated with women, stuff like that.
I mean that I'm more lenient with. Like I am definitely getting a sternum piece at some point because I just like that position. But you do
Uh-huh.
often see people that nowadays think that's a very feminine tattoo, getting a tattoo here,
Uh-huh.
and often it's just called an underboob tattoo, which I find quite funny. So like, no, it's a sternum piece, but no, the underboob tattoo.
Yeah.
It's funny how these things become coded in that way,
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
sort of norms
definitely.
within the subculture as well, where you don't really break any norms by being a heavily tattooed woman if you're in the tattoo subculture, but there's still certain norms sometimes about what do you get tattooed,
Yeah.
it seems.
Yeah, maybe you could get a sleeve that's of roses and flowers, pastel, but not like, yeah, horror themed
Oh, I will
sleeve.
say that I've met way too many women that love horror and
I
get horror
know.
sleeves, but
Definitely.
but for the exercise of this question, it does work.
For the
But it is
mainstream
interesting.
audience, not our subculture. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. But it is interesting to think about because we do sort of put up our own norms when you get a bit more into the subculture. And for anybody that is
Yeah.
curious, Beverly
That's
is
the
quite tattooed herself. We just can't see it right now in the camera, but Beverly does have
the
tattoos as well.
psychologists could do their own like laboratory
Oh
experiment,
yeah.
like send someone like you and send someone like me, see what different like social reactions we get. Send a
Yeah, we were
woman with a
talking about
floral
that we had to do
sleeve.
a man
Yeah,
on the street sort of thing in New York and Copenhagen and see how people react to us.
exactly. Because yeah, in my book, I have a whole chapter on like public reactions and sanctions. Like people coming up and touching someone's body.
Oh
And
yeah.
you had mentioned that people touch you. And I said, oh, I'm surprised by that because women are just more touchable and
Oh, I mean, it's
women's
way worse
bodies
for
are
women.
more like the property of,
Yeah.
social property. And so for someone to come up and touch me compared to you, like that's a different kind
Well,
of feeling.
I have thought about it since, and I think it's also a Danish culture thing, but we are just less personal space here,
Oh yeah, right.
traditionally speaking.
Yeah,
So we just
that's
touch in
there's
general.
that.
Like when you're talking to somebody, if you get along with them, even if you haven't met them for long, you might even touch their shoulder or their upper arm and stuff like that. But people also just don't have boundaries, especially with the drink in Copenhagen and Denmark in general. So I've had many a shirt ruined because some young guy wants to see my chest tattoos, and I'm like, fuck
Oh,
off.
okay. Because I would also say like, yeah, okay, so different cultural
Yeah,
norms
I
of
think
that, but
there's
also
definitely
different
that
like
variable in
for
there.
gender, because
Yeah.
like
Oh yeah.
women can touch women, women can touch men, but like would a man come up and touch you compared
Oh
to a
yeah.
man coming up and touching me? Like that would be a boundary here is like a
I,
man
I
touching another man.
I sadly think that both boundaries get broken frequently here, but but I will say I do get what you mean, and I will say it is way worse for women, especially in countries like here and other parts of Europe where they are still a bit more lacking behind in certain more progressive views.
Hmm.
So they just don't care. Like if you've got a tattoo as a woman, they almost see it as a free pass to go up and like pull
Right.
your clothing away or touch you
Right.
or
Yeah.
stuff like that.
People,
And some people also still carry around that old fucking prejudice that tattooed women are promiscuous or easy.
right.
So,
Well, yeah,
which
because
is,
deviance with men is associated with violence, deviance with
yeah.
women is associated with sexuality. So
And you're
therefore, you're
still very much,
deviant.
I don't want to drag my own country too much, but it is still a bit, it's getting better. But I remember a lot of nights out where tattooed women I knew, definitely they would be assumed to be sluts or
Oh
promiscuous
yeah.
or
Uh-huh.
easy or wanting to show off their bodies. And men would want to get in fights with me because they would just assume I was aggressive. So if we had an
Wow.
argument, they would way quicker jump to wanting to defend themselves just because I'm tattooed,
Yeah, yeah, I could
which
see
is quite
that.
interesting as well. But it is funny. Like I would love to experience, like you say, do a little street experiment and go out and see how people react. But it's also the other variable to it that we're both highly educated. You especially. I mean,
Uh-huh.
you both faculty at a university and you've done extensive work that's published. Yet it's interesting to see if people even entertain that thought because I think they're more likely to in the
Yeah.
States entertain the thought that you're heavily tattooed but also highly educated. And the same in the UK. Whereas in Denmark, I think most people would still assume that you do some sort of blue collar work if you're heavily tattooed.
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah, the different stereotypes.
That
Because
or
I
creative
wrote,
work. Blue collar or creative work. That's what they would assume.
yeah. Right. Yeah, you're not, yeah, a suit or something.
But definitely not an office job. Like that's what they would probably
Yeah.
say here.
'Cause I wrote one article about tattooed professors and I open with that stereotype, the stereotype of the professor. And
Mm.
so, an older white man in a tweed suit or what have you. And then, yeah, a tattooed person, someone who looks like me. So I don't fit the stereotype of a professor. So yeah, it's just at odds of like fitting into that kind of role. But
But again,
those things are changing too. Like
oh
definitely
yeah,
even the
definitely.
demographics of professors are changing and
Mm.
all, of these professions. I mean, my generation is getting older, so we're entering those professions and those situations.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, as I said, just the difference between countries as close as the UK and Denmark is profound when it comes to this. Like, you see way more tattooed professionals, and they seem way more okay with tattoos in a professional setting in the UK compared
Yeah.
to Denmark. And even I think, but Sweden's an odd one because it sort of goes back and forth a lot. But it seems Sweden as well, they're way more lenient with it than they are just across the river in Denmark,
Mm.
And
Yeah,
we're
that's
countries
interesting.
with a lot of shared culture and history, yet there's such a disparity in this sort of
Yeah.
visual culture and
And then
acceptance of
other
it.
cultures, Latin America, Asia,
Mm.
even Latin America recently, like I was there in Guatemala talking to some local folks. And of course they see lots of, heavily tattooed tourists, and that's fine because those are other, tourists. But of their own people, they said it's still, quite still
Yeah.
stigmatized. And traveling in Latin America, I mean, the tattoos are not at a different, stage than in
Yeah.
the United States. For example, I went to Chile, and that's a high income country, so they had lots of extensive tattoos,
Yeah.
colorful, large. But if you go to like Guatemala, the tattoos are small, they're black and gray, and there's just not very many because it's still very associated with criminality. So it's not very open there. And then of course Asia, like we were talking
Oh
about
yeah.
Asian tattoo culture, which is up and coming, really prominent, but still associated with criminality, especially in older generations. But it
Mm.
is there and it is in younger
Absolutely.
generations. And I definitely want to, really explore that in my future travels and research. Is like, can you imagine going to like a tattoo convention in China and Japan
Oh, I
and
would love to go to one of the,
Taiwan?
see, Japan. I have a sort of bucket list of wanting to go to one of their
Yeah.
tattoo festivals because they have three of them
Yes.
in Tokyo, and one of them's 300 years old or something like that. And
Oh,
just kept
wow.
going on. And it's just this ancient
A
tattoo
festival.
festival, like celebrating Irasumi, especially, the
Wow.
traditional bodysuits.
Yeah.
And that sounds interesting. But also, in contrast, going to, for example, King of Ink in Tokyo, which is a modern tattoo convention done in
Oh my God.
Japanese style.
Yeah, I want to go.
And I
So
follow that one on Instagram. And I count every year, it's like a Christmas present when they start posting from it. Because it's fascinating to see some of the differences and some of the similarities
okay.
between that and other tattoo conventions.
I gotta go to that. What month
Oh,
is
if you need an
it?
assistant,
I
do
gotta
bring me
go.
along.
And yeah, like we
I'll
mentioned,
carry cameras and luggage, and
okay.
I'll finish
Yeah.
learning Japanese by then, Beverly, and you can bring me along.
That sounds like perfect pairing. I'm like 5 feet tall. I have like a lot of trouble.
And I'm
Like
6 foot,
I can't put
so
stuff in the overhead bin on the airplane. Like I need help. So
well,
that's
to
perfect.
any audience members, you heard it here. So you'll have to email Beverly if you don't see her bring me to Japan at some point.
Like, and we mentioned like, oh man, Korea, like that's
Yeah,
really interesting because Korea, like it's basically illegal to tattoo there because you have to
yeah,
be a medical doctor,
yeah.
but they have some of the best tattoos in the world coming out of
Incredible
Korea.
tattoo artists there,
Yeah, so I
and they're
really want to
technically
see what's
all
going on
criminals.
there.
Yet they're all, as soon as they leave Korea, they're regular tattoo artists in a legal sense, and just
Yeah,
incredible at their work. It's a
just
weird
yeah, highly
status to be
skilled.
in.
Amazing.
Absolutely. I would sort of bringing it back to some of the previous research. I would love to see modern research done as well on how the gender fits in to their tattoo cultures, like their
Yeah,
budding modern tattoo cultures now, because they have had ancient tattoo cultures before, but that's not as relevant
yeah.
to modern day Japan or Korea or China. So it'd be interesting to see in East Asia how gender figures into this right now.
Yeah, that's true. Because I guess I'm following a lot of artists that do these small, dainty, colorful
Yeah,
pieces.
see, I follow the ones that do the big ones.
Oh, okay. So I'm like, hmm. But some of these, like I see women getting these small, dainty, colorful tattoos, hyper realist. But then it might be like on their neck, So I'm
Yeah.
like, damn, that's a neck tattoo, or they get it highly visible
There's also, for
too.
example, in China especially, I've seen a lot of what it looks like be younger women, also sometimes in Korea and Japan, that get like full like traditional Asian bodysuits done. And then you
Mm-hmm.
start wondering, but okay, but these are also more conservative cultures, especially in China, where you have the whole citizen point system, and tattoos can count negatively to that. How do these women navigate that? And oftentimes, when you hear about embodiment culture in China, it's still quite traditional gender-wise. So I
I
wonder
have to
how
look into
that
that.
fits into it as well. Being a
Yeah.
heavily tattooed woman in China and how that's navigated.
Yeah.
I would love to see research come out of this, especially from researchers that have some connection
Yeah.
to Asia. I
Because
don't
there's a
want
lot
to.
of research previously on like, yeah, traditional kinds of
Yeah,
cultural tattooing, but what about, because I'm looking at especially contemporary, like consumer
yeah.
culture, modern, yeah, stuff like that. So how is that impacting? And just
Because
the
you,
foreigners traveling to these
yeah,
countries tattooing, because yeah, you might see a lot of like, white British folks tattooing out of Thailand or something.
yeah.
And, you were hoping to get a tattoo from a local
Oh,
person.
I cannot count the white middle-aged men I've met in Britain that have a tattoo from Thailand.
So yeah, I need to get more global in my scope. But
It would
yeah,
be
like
interesting at least. Like
Yeah,
because
my other research, I'm looking at like sustainable tourism and diversity in
mm,
travel. And I did, some writing on digital nomads. So I would
yeah,
love to look at just, the tourists, the tattooed tourists traveling the world,
honestly, that would fit right
stuff
into you
like
because there's
that.
the social media aspect of how you hear about foreign tattoo artists, and then also the whole
Yeah,
tourism aspect of saving up, planning a trip,
the
all these
elites.
things. That would be a great research project for you. I would love to see you do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to travel the world and get tattooed by, I mean, I got my sleeves in Australia, so I did,
That is true. You have
and
tried it at
that
least.
was not a good idea because,
But I mean, it cannot only be Chris Lynn who gets to travel to do tattoo research.
right. Oh my gosh, yeah. So very cool in the islands. In the future though, I have to just get small tattoos. I'll
I
get
mean,
like 1 or 2 hour tattoos that can be completed in one day.
right, that's
But
what you mean. Yeah,
like
yeah.
I committed to getting, sleeve tattoos in Australia and I had to go back
Yeah.
there for years, to get this work
Mm,
done. And luckily I completed my sleeves right before the pandemic. Can you
yeah.
imagine? I would have been locked out of Australia for
That would
years,
have
undo
sucked.
my
Oh.
half done like
Like
sleeves.
I hate when I have an unfinished tattoo on my body. I
Yeah.
just want to get it finished. I can't imagine the nuisance it was to you having unfinished sleeves and needing to plan
Yeah.
to go
Go
back to
back.
Australia and all that.
And then just mentally to know that I have to sit there, for an entire day. And one time I did like 2 days, back to back. So
Hmm.
not in the same area, but
Uh,
that's pretty brutal.
I'm curious to ask you a couple of personal questions now about the
Sure.
sleeve tattoos. Because I don't know if we've talked about this before, but it just came to me now. Do you notice any difference in how people interact with you after you got your arms sleeved up?
I don't, I guess we change with our sensitivity too, but it was quite a shock. Yeah. Yeah. Like I had, the usual progression of an
Yeah.
armband and then going down. I got a lot of tattoos like lasered off, and
Oh, right.
covered up and stuff. And then some of other stuff was, I have other tattoos that had to be worked into the design. But yeah, I mean, it's just like I have more and more tattoos and it's a lot more bold. So before, if I just had an armband or whatever, but now even myself, like, I could feel uncomfortable, like if I'm at work at a, meeting or something like that. And it's like to cover up. That's why I named my book Covered, because it's like you're covered in ink, but you also cover up to hide your
Mm.
tattoos. And so, even just, yeah, recently, yeah, it can be kind of uncomfortable, based on your situation, being at work and stuff like that. But I guess I haven't really noticed. Maybe times are also changing at that same
I mean
pace.
that is a good point. The times are very much changing, and it is later in your career you got
Yeah.
the
And just, yeah,
sleeves.
I'm growing up, I'm like just a lot more confident because I did hide my tattoos in my career for professionally for at least 10 years.
Mm.
So I'm only now comfortable for maybe 5 years or so. I, didn't color my hair as often, maybe
No.
as earlier. And now I'm just a lot more confident and
Yeah.
comfortable. But the thing is in the workplace is that you never know the
Yeah.
one person who can cause you problems, you don't know who that's going to be.
No.
And so you kind of do have to hide. And in academia in particular, like
Yeah.
it's such a
Yeah.
culture of fear, like
Yeah.
that's why, like, oh, wait till I get tenure and then I can, exhale and
Yeah.
relax, have a life, get a tattoo. That's why in my book on tattooed professors that I am maybe working on, I have a chapter called My Tenure Tattoo. So
Ah,
just that
right.
concept of like wait till tenure
The
and then
whole
you
like
can have a
relaxation,
life.
the calm of knowing you're safe in your position. It
But
is
that's
quite
not
interesting.
true because once you get tenure, then you're so trained to be obedient that you are obedient then.
That's true as well. But I think sometimes it seems women face even more of this scrutiny in
Yeah.
academia than men do. Like
Yeah,
it seems
sure.
that you are
Absolutely.
often surveilled a lot more by your peers and
Right.
superiors, and
Yeah.
it almost still to this day seems like they're just looking for you to slip up, and even just like having a tattoo that might be too much or whatever. is immediately an excuse for them to come in and scrutinize it and be like, hey, you
right.
can't have
And
that here.
you're
You need to cover that up, or you know, like,
the reaction of your students.
yeah,
I did, yeah, I'm working on another article on tattooed professors, and I did interview like a range of people, like
yeah,
whereas for my book I interviewed only women, but
mm,
this article I interviewed, white men and different races and sexualities, and so yeah, as white men, they can basically like wear they could, I make a joke, they can wear a garbage bag to school and just still be taken seriously, like it does not matter what, you wear, because
mm,
that embodiment alone just commands a certain authority, so
mm,
they can wear jeans and t-shirts. But for the women that I interviewed, and especially like, I mean, white women and then, women of color, like have to worry about different things.
mm.
But for women, you're always worried about self-surveilling your body,
You're
like
completely aware of the
are
embodiment of
things
your
covered
identity at all
up?
times.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just this hyper awareness of like how your body is and
yeah.
how people are looking at
Yeah,
it
because
and
you don't
like
ever
that.
hear a story about a male professor that buttoned a button down too low and suddenly he's
Right.
accused of
Yeah.
being overly sexual in his appearance. But you can find
Yes,
several
exactly.
stories of female professors that might have worn a top that was just a little bit too low cut, and suddenly their
Right.
whole integrity is called into question, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, women are especially just always worried about,
But that's also why I
yeah,
think
being
that
sexually
tattoos,
objectified.
yeah, exactly. And that's why I think that tattoos for female academics, I've not seen the data, but it wouldn't
Yeah,
surprise me if you're more scrutinized on that point as well. It would sort of fit
right.
into the normal sort of
Yeah, because the
reaction that you
intersection of those
face.
two stereotypes contradict. Because as a woman, like, yeah, the sexual deviance, then you're an idiot if you got a tattoos, but then you're a professor, so you're supposed to be smart. So how could you
Yeah.
be have tattoos? So there's just this kind of, it doesn't line up.
No, but that's also the weird, socially constructed nature of these
Right.
stigmas and prejudices. Because
Contradiction.
like I've spoken with several academics I've had on here and professionals, it's weird how people will sometimes almost believe that tattoos make your IQ drop a few points.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
even though, as we've spoken about, especially for women out there sometimes as well, it can actually be a way to claim your right to be stake your claim for your identity, and it can be
Right.
confidence inducing, which often makes you better at what you do. It can make you
Right.
better at teaching, especially because talking to students and be seeming professional and knowledgeable and skilled at what you do, that requires some performative confidence. Like,
Yeah, and the students love it. Like they're not,
yeah, oh,
the ones with the
absolutely.
problem.
Uh,
Students
the,
love it. It's just the older administrative folks that we might worry about.
I mean, I've at least had some questions about, even just as a GTA when I was at Glasgow. I've had some questions about my tattoos. Even some people asking me where for advice of where to go to get some and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that's an appropriate question.
Yeah, I
Because a
mean,
lot of questions that we get as tattooed people are, inappropriate, or they're just
oh
trying
yeah,
to point out that they notice you have tattoos, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you don't need to
The-
verbalize that.
There are a lot of questions based in willful ignorance or perhaps just general ignorance towards tattoos.
Yeah. Yeah. So a question based out of, in a sense of the community would be good. Like
I mean,
what artist,
yeah,
I like that
yeah,
artwork. What artist was that? That's someone I'd want to go to. Or that you
yeah.
relate to someone's
Oh
design or
yeah.
something like that. Or that you both have the same, imagery. I go to a lot of like reptile conventions. And so
Mm.
that's the intersection. I meet a lot of people there who have reptile tattoos, so that's
Oh
to
yeah.
see.
That's a lot of funny thing. I think a lot of subcultures gravitate towards tattoos because there's this shared need for passion between wanting to
Yeah.
having a lot of tattoos requires passion for that, and being really into a subculture requires passion for that, and then it sort of just
Yeah,
naturally
tattoos, imagery
interjects.
are just whatever the person's passionate about.
Yeah.
So yeah, like
Oftentimes, at
that.
least. I
Yeah,
mean, I would at
exactly.
least say in most cases that is the case.
Right.
Uh, I think that's just, as you would say, a battle scar, as you would say in Denmark, from having been in sociology, that I always fear making a total
Right.
statement, you know.
Not all, not all tattoos.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's the thing I saw is it's just like people are going to pick whatever random designs, but
Yeah.
it's something that they're,
It
passionate enough
still
about
reflects
to
them to a
put on their
side.
body.
I don't know how you agree with this. You've researched tattoos for longer than I ever did, but I don't think there is such a thing as a meaningless tattoo. I think there are tattoos devoid of any thought over narrative and stuff like that, and tattoos that may seem random. But the simple fact that you might be that into being tattooed or to being tattooed itself means something to you, still
Right.
carries some sort of meaning to the person.
Yeah, it could, I mean, the meaning could be that it looks cool or,
Yeah.
that you got it with someone or that mark that moment.
Yeah. Or
Get
even
it
that it
from
looks
that
stupid.
artist.
I mean, I've met people that just want
Okay.
to just get them to look like I've at least met one or two people that just like they'll get the most random shit that just needs to look bad, and that's sort of the thing for them.
Yeah. Yeah, we're I almost got one totally random tattoo, but I thought better of it.
The closest I got to that was a tattoo artist that wanted to give me a gift after a great article I wrote about him for an otherwise not so good online tattoo publication I worked at for at the time. And I met him at a in person then at a tattoo convention in Sweden, and he was so adamant that he wanted to give me a tattoo as a thank you. That with a hangover the next day after the after party, I got a sword done on back here.
Oh.
And that's the closest. That's the closest I've gotten to a random tattoo.
Yeah, no, yeah. Besides my first bad, tattoo that I got, I mean, it was a good tattoo, bad idea. I haven't really gotten random tattoos, and I do kind of stick to my general rule of,
Mm,
thinking about it for 1 year.
yeah.
So I do try to think about it a lot. I guess I get one tattoo with my cousin, but it's her Chinese name and my
All right.
symbol. So that was, a bonding family kind of
Yeah,
thing.
no, I get it. That's really sweet. But I mean, for me as well, like it's also of the circumstances of not having been the most lucky economically the last many years. So
Yeah,
I tend to
I got
just get
some
a long window to think about my tattoos, but I still always intended to, at
clothes.
least give them some thought. Like at least think about, okay, will I want this? How might I imagine it looking? Who do I imagine doing this on me? And really figuring out all the little parts of it.
Yeah. Yeah, not to say I didn't get bad tattoos. Obviously,
We all get a couple of bad tattoos.
I'm lasering, yeah, quite a few off. I did get, I don't know, I don't even remember now, 4 or 5 lasered off, but on my sleeves, I got them lasered enough to be lightened so that they could be
Yeah.
popped over. But I am trying to get one fully removed on my abdomen. And
Mm.
it's horrifying to think. I think I've been lasering this thing for like 8 years.
Yeah, you really
And
gotta
it's
think it
still
through because
there.
you can't. As at least every dermatologist I've ever worked with, especially one from Denmark, that's one of the leading guys in all of Europe. He also told me once, you can't remove them with laser. You can lighten them,
Yeah,
and in some cases you're very lucky. They can become almost imperceptible,
almost.
but they're still there. And
Yeah,
also, especially talking about the body's chemistry and what you put into it, it's still there. It's just been lightened.
yeah.
The only way to actually remove the tattoo is surgically. And
Oh,
funny enough, the
no
episode coming
way.
out next week is with the surgeon Dr. John Brocious.
Oh
And in
my
that episode,
gosh.
we did talk about this because one of the surgeries he's also tried to perform and has some experience with is also removing tattoos, even though he's very
Oh
heavily
my
tattooed
God.
himself. And he confirmed that the only way to actually remove a tattoo is surgically removing the skin. And if you want to know how deep you go, I recommend
I
people look that up
I
themselves. But
don't
I would
how
suggest
graphic
having
do you get
eaten
on that episode?
beforehand.
Because I'm pretty squeamish. Maybe I
No, we
can't
don't
even
get
watch
graphic.
that.
We don't get graphic. But if people want to
Okay.
see graphic stuff, they could just go to John's own Instagram profile and click on some of his posts and remove the blur, and
Oh
you'll see
no.
some very graphic stuff.
No,
Not
thank
tattoo
you.
removals, but finger attachments, gunshot wounds,
Oh
other
no.
stuff like that. Uh,
Yeah, at that stage, if it had to be surgically removed, I would just cover it up, forget about it.
but yeah, but you can't really tattoo the area again after it's been surgically removed, as far as I understand,
Oh
because
no,
the whole
I
scar
mean
tissue that
before
forms
the
after.
surgery. No
Yeah, yeah.
surgery, just
No, yeah, absolutely get it. Rather lighten it and cover it up.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that's also why you not gotta think it through because certain very heavy black work almost becomes impossible to ever lighten enough to cover it up.
Yeah, but in some cases, black ink, yeah, it's
It
laser,
is more easily dissolvable often by the laser, but
color,
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Older tattoos are easier to remove than newer, but yeah, it's you got to think it through.
Yeah, I mean, I always try to tell people it's not that I want them to go out and find a deep story to connect to a tattoo. That helps too. I mean,
Mhm.
absolutely do that if that's what you want, but just think it through. Like just basic think it, basically just think it over. Do you really want to be tattooed? Do you really know you want to be tattooed? Do you really know you like this style,
Yeah,
this image, the placement, all that stuff? Because
yeah,
once it's there, it's not as easy as some people make it out to be to get rid of it
right.
again.
And what I learned from my participants, because I asked them the question, like, did you ever anticipate the level of attention your tattoo received? And no
Mm,
one does. Like,
yeah.
you don't realize, like, 5 years later, you're going to the store and someone's commenting on a tattoo. You don't even remember you
Oh,
have it.
I'm
It's on your
so happy
back.
you said that, and that certain academics I have on here keep saying that, and tattoo artists, because I really don't think a lot of young people anticipate this. And that's why I, for example, started on my chest so I could control who sees it. Because
Yeah,
no matter both positive and negatively, it's gonna garner you a lot more attention than you might be used to. And for
yeah,
example, if you're a bit of an introverted nerd like I was
right,
back
right.
then, you might not want people to constantly come up to you and talk
Exactly.
about your tattoo or wanting to see it. So you gotta try. I always try to tell young people, you gotta try out being tattooed first. And especially young women are trying to warn them about, hey, you already face this with men wanting to look at you and all that. So do really think it through where
Yeah.
you put the first one and how tattooed you want to be. Because I'm all for you covering all of your body if that's what you want, but you gotta know you want to do that.
Yeah. It yeah, brings a lot of attention. And I don't like that attention. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone's different. Some people like it more than others, but
For me, it depends
so
on what kind, but
yeah,
sometimes you just want to be yourself. Like sometimes you just
right.
want to be left
So
alone.
you kind of always have like a sweater in your car or something. You're going to the store.
I
It's
mean,
like you don't
for
want to
me, it
deal with
helps
it.
being a bit bigger nowadays than I used to be. When I was really skinny, people didn't really fear anything at all, and
Uh-huh.
that stereotype sort of didn't help me. Like, so people would just see it as free game to go over and wanting to see my tattoo and talk to me about them. Now that I've gotten bigger, I sort of cruise along with some of the bad stereotypes that still exist, especially in Denmark. So some people don't want to talk to me at all because of my tattoos.
Yeah, I was actually hanging out with my friend's mom the other day, and the mother, I was wearing a sweater, and the mother looked at a picture of someone with tattoos or someone in the restaurant and made a
Mm.
rude comment, like, look at that person with their tattoos. Why would you do that? And so I just kept my sweater on then, like, and then I had to think about it, like, okay, if I'm getting too hot and I take my sweater off, she's gonna see that, so I'll just keep it on,
Man, what a situation
And
to
of
be in.
course, like, I personally hid my tattoos from my father for over 20 years, so
Yeah, I'm
I
quite
have
lucky
done
there. I
that
never had to
experience.
hide mine from my parents. They were, if there's any parents listening into this, I would say what my parents did is perhaps the most perfect way to handle teenagers wanting tattoos. Me and my brother came to them at 14 and said, we want to get tattoos. And they said, hey,
Mhm.
here's the thing. If you can promise us you wait till you're 18 and you use your head and think about it thoroughly
Mhm.
before you do it, then we trust you with your body and your decision. Just keep your career and your future in mind.
Yeah,
You
well,
know?
and that shows the difference of like different like
Absolutely.
cultural backgrounds too,
Absolutely.
because
Well,
in
even
my
different
research,
countries,
it's
different parenting styles and that.
it's the Asian American
Oh, yeah.
and Asians that would go the furthest to hide their
Hmm.
tattoos completely from their parents. And of course, it was those parents that would go to the most extreme of completely disowning their children.
Yeah.
I have a video on my YouTube about, one person that was disowned from her Korean parents. And then, and I also interviewed one artist, the only artist ever who was I think Chinese American, the only tattoo artist I've ever met who had no tattoos herself.
I have
And
met some, and I always find it a bit strange.
yeah, it's very strange because
Like,
definitely collecting tattoos is part
I
of
get that
being
in
a
theory, you
tattooer.
don't, there's not a lock on tattoo machines that say when you don't have tattoos and want to pick one up. I get that in theory it can be done, But I always think about the cultural and social aspects of it, that how I would feel if somebody without tattoos tattooed me.
Yeah, because part of being a tattooer is knowing, yeah, how it feels and being
Mhm.
on that receiving end.
And
So,
also, I actually talked with John about this as well, and I made an analogy he really loves, so we'll test this with you as
mm.
well. But I feel about it like this, and I'm going to use the fact that my dad's a plumber for this as well. I would not trust a plumber to really get the urgency of fixing my toilet if he's okay with shitting on the floor at his house. Like, he's gotta be into having a toilet himself as well. I feel the same way about tattooers. I trust them way more with my body and this transformation a tattoo can be if they like tattoos themselves
Yeah, yeah,
and enjoy get them.
yeah,
And that goes
totally.
even beyond the pain aspect. That's also a comfort that they know how much different body parts hurt and how to try and navigate that on a
Right.
different another person's body as well. But even ignoring that, I just feel it's strange that it might just be me, but if somebody's tattooing me and they don't have tattoos, I keep thinking, okay, so you think I'm an idiot. You must think I'm a sucker getting this done. Like you're just grinning on your way to the bank, thinking about all the idiots you get to ruin the bodies of, and then you like
Yeah, there's so few of these folks that,
there
we
are
have
very few of them, and some of them are quite talented. I once did an article I picked myself for this shitty tattoo magazine I used to work for, where it was a third generation tattooer in Australia. Her grandfather was a tattooer, her dad was a tattooer,
Wow.
and she was learning to be a tattooer. They are both traditionally, fucking covered in tattoos. She didn't have a one, and even
Wow.
though they had told her, "Hey, we'll help you. You don't have to get them by us. Would go get some tattoos if you want." She had no plans to get a tattoo, at least at that
Wow.
time, which just
Yeah.
fascinates me, because there's a third generation tattoo that sort of compounds the problem a little bit.
I guess she's, yeah, rebelling against,
Mm.
that.
In a way, you would sort of suspect that, but it didn't seem to be the case. Like, they were also staunch defenders, her father at least. I can't remember the full. I found some videos and clips of them. Uh, but at least the father was a staunch defender of her ability to tattoo, and that she could still do that even if she doesn't have any.
Hmm. Yeah,
Which fine. I
interesting.
mean, that is true. It doesn't remove your ability to tattoo not having any. It's just the social and cultural aspect that gets a bit
Yeah,
questionable.
right.
Would you get one by somebody without tattoos if they did tattoos
Oh
you
yeah,
really
sure.
liked?
Absolutely. Yeah, just based on their work.
See, I'm not sure. Like I must admit that this carries further with me than I thought it might. But I mean, in one way, yeah, sure, if they really do amazing tattoos. But then again, I don't know how I would feel about like sitting there with them going through that, and then like I don't think I could not ask them while they tattoo me, why don't you have any,
Yeah.
or are you gonna
Yeah,
get one?
sure. This
Because
is
that would
like
be
the
that would be
reverse.
rattling about my brain for the whole entire session.
I guess they would get that a lot then.
They must. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if that's a thought that crosses any client's mind if they're getting tattooed by somebody without tattoos.
And this is an interesting topic because for example, writing my book, so I met so many amazing women tattoo artists, and previously I had gotten just randomly tattooed by women to the point where I made it a rule for myself, like I'm only going to get tattooed by women. And so actually my sleeves are done by a Korean man who's from
Oh,
Korea and was in Australia in Sydney. And he didn't speak a lot of English. So when we were doing my tattoos, we didn't talk, we both had our headphones in. And I have so many questions for him. Like, I wish that we did talk because, like, he's from Korea, that's really
oh
interesting.
yeah.
But then I regretted, like, well, I shouldn't have been so severe in my rule of like only be tattooed by women. I mean, obviously that's very essentialist. And you can be highly selective about what tattoo artists and whatever criteria, but it really, maybe I was
Mm,
wrong to be so essentialist in that decision. Like,
mm,
obviously there's, plenty of super cool men that I would be tattooed
mm,
by. But like I'm just thinking now about my participants interviewing queer folks, folks of color, like they might feel that like, oh, I want to get, I'm trans, I
yeah.
want to get tattooed by another trans person. And I know that, that would be magical, of course, and
Mm,
comforting in queer shops, but but also like we shouldn't impose these strict rules, basically, like just be flexible, be open to
Mm,
being tattooed by, because that's the reverse thing of like plenty of people
yeah.
back in the day are like, I'll never be tattooed by a woman, what does a woman know? So we just
Yeah,
got to be a bit,
it sort of
open-minded.
reverses the discrimination in a way
Yeah.
sometimes. But I do get where they're coming from, especially some women with some of the horror stories you still hear to this day about male tattooers at times.
Yeah. But
But
it's
I do
not like
agree
I
with
would
your
have,
point as well.
gone to some,
No, exactly.
person I felt
Uh,
uncomfortable with.
but
So
that's my point. You do have way more of an ability today to vet people
yeah.
before you get tattooed by them. And you can even nowadays sort of snoop around the network that might be
Yeah,
around them and try and
exactly.
figure out if they're not upfront with how they are. You can sort of figure out, okay, how are they? And if it's a
Right.
local shop, you could even go there and try and observe, okay, how are they behaving? Am I
Yeah.
okay with this person doing it? So, I mean, I'm very much agreeing with you that I would way rather recommend people do due diligence on researching an artist rather than being too severe in who they in what type of tattoo artist they want.
Yeah. We all
Like
probably get hung up on like, oh, even
I think so.
styles
Yeah.
and stuff, like
Yeah.
I have never like I would now like to get in the future like a small hand poke tattoo. Like I've never
Oh,
gotten one of those before.
yeah. I have somebody that could do that for you in Copenhagen, maybe if you if you come in for that conference.
Yeah, in the future, I'm just getting small tattoos because I had my entire back
Yeah.
done, like that took
Oof.
like 10 years going to Florida and
One
stuff.
day.
And then my sleeves to Australia. So now in the future, it's like I have a theme and I don't need to stick to the theme either. It's like, I don't
Yeah.
know, maybe I'm just like a rigid-minded person because I get into
I
like,
think that's
I'm
okay.
gonna
I mean,
do like my legs in only this theme. And it's like, who cares?
I think
Like you
that's
made the
cool
rule,
though.
break
Like,
the rule.
I mean, I think to some extent that's very much up to the individual. Like I have certain visions like that as well with certain parts of my body that I want certain things done on.
But
Whereas
now,
other
we
people,
have limited space,
true,
like
true.
I need to broaden it up because yeah, I'm
Well,
working
you
on my
have used
legs
more of your
now a
space
little
than I
bit.
have of mine, so it's more critical for you.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Oh, I
But
didn't mean
yeah,
the surface area. I just meant the fact that I only have, my arms and chest and
that's
ribs
right.
covered. So,
Yeah, I have my
do
entire back, my whole sleeves.
you have your legs yet at all?
I'm just getting it. I just have a few dainty little,
All
like three
right.
little tattoos on my legs. I
I
don't
have
want
nothing on
to.
the legs yet.
Oh, okay. I just want a
Nothing at
few
all.
little small tattoos on the outer of my legs.
Oh, okay. I do want to cover it all. Like very much so. Very, very envious of people like Matt the Ink Shrink. Like
You want to be fully covered.
not my stomach for some reason. I have a very
Oh,
clear
yeah,
idea
see.
not wanting that, but the rest of me, yes.
Yeah, I don't want any on my front torso.
Oh no, I am only meaning this area. This is skin suits,
Uh-huh.
abdomen and all that stuff. But for some reason, the abs don't want them to.
Yeah.
But that might change though.
Right, exactly. Because
Because also
then,
changed my opinion about my throat after I got this done.
oh, oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, that man. Yeah. I just imagine like, because it already feels like they're cutting you open with a knife, It's like, what the hell? Am I like
I mean,
bleeding
the
out?
pain wasn't so bad. It's worse that it feels like you're choking when you get anything done on the
Yeah, I
front
would
here.
imagine like it would feel like you're getting your throat
I would
slit.
say this, I have not spoken to a woman about this, but I would like to at one point. But the thing is, for me, the Adam's apple definitely didn't make it fun.
Okay.
Because
But
any sort of
yeah.
swallowing or movement from that, no.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That
That
sounds
made
scary.
it way worse. Uh, but I don't know. I mean, I imagine the movement bit would go for any throat, whether you have an Adam's apple or not.
Right. Yeah.
But I still think it might play in not in a good way though, having
Yeah.
one
No,
because this is a
of
further
course.
obstruction. But
Right,
yeah.
exactly. But I do have like suddenly an appeal to get my head tattooed.
Oh yeah, I want that too. I want that too.
Yeah,
Especially
on the
after
side of
seeing
my
guys
head.
like you'll probably if you watch the episode next the week after we record this one coming out,
Uh-huh.
you might get an even further urge to it because
Oh,
John has
okay.
some really cool tattoos on the side of his head.
And so what did he say? How does that feel? It sounds like a jackhammer hitting your
I
skull.
didn't speak to John about that, but that's because I've met so many people, working for tattoo magazines and that and going around conventions that have had
Uh-huh.
tattoos. So I've asked that question so many times. Most people I meet say it's not that bad on the head.
Okay.
But everybody else, the smaller margin, nobody's in between. It's either not that bad or it's horrible to
Okay.
get tattooed on the head.
Horrible, like,
Pain wise. The shaking and the like rattling, that's
yeah,
a different thing.
rattling.
That's not fun for anybody. Nobody likes the noise of it, usually.
Yeah. So is there any difference that like the temple versus the top of your head?
The top's worse pain wise, I
Oh, I
hear.
can feel it. Like maybe it
Yeah.
would be more sensitive there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
at
I
least
was
what I hear. The
thinking,
top's way worse. I should
yeah.
ask John's girlfriend when I get to interview her, because she's a nurse and she's gotten her whole head covered.
Oh,
Like
wow.
it's just the face free. I should ask
Wow,
her.
that's cool. And also you do have to think about hair loss in the future. Even as
Well,
women, like women could have hair
oh no,
thinning.
I'm definitely going bald in the future, which has made my plan to not tattoo the top go right out the window. If I go bald fully, I'm definitely doing the top of the head as well.
Because if you did just the sides, then it would be,
Well,
like.
I do want to do the sides especially, but I might actually do the top too when I go bald, like fully
And I
bald.
was thinking, like, I wouldn't want to get something like, evil looking, like a black spider, but I was thinking I would like jewel beetles because it would be
Ah,
colorful and dainty, but it would be like a
this
beetle.
actually to bring us a bit back to the topic here at the end. It's interesting. I'm noticing a lot of similarities in how both of us like feel about these areas and getting them tattooed. And I think
Uh-huh.
that's especially what I was talking about earlier with that when you're in the subculture a bit like we are,
Yeah.
some of these gender norms about how many tattoos you get and how covered you get sort of get blurred quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah,
Which I like.
I've
Like,
seen some women lately, like
oh,
saw this
I
one
love a
Asian
heavily
woman
tattooed
who
chick.
just has this whole like head tattoo and it's just like yeah, bold and super
I mean,
cool.
excuse me, anybody that might be sensitive to me saying this, but I love me a heavily tattooed chick. Oh, that is, I mean, first of all, it's a massive commitment to yourself, which that's just sexy in anybody committing to yourself. And the other thing is just tattoos look amazing, especially when they're
Yeah.
well done and covering
Yeah.
large
And
areas and that. So
bold.
yeah,
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 absolutely agree.
fully. And weirdly, this might be controversial. I find face tattoos better looking on women than men often.
Mm.
Like eyebrow tattoos or something, but over the eye or stuff like that. Oftentimes, or here, oftentimes find that way better looking on women than I do on men.
Huh. Interesting.
But that's just a personal preference. That's not at all like any science or anything or generalized. That's just absolutely a personal preference.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we've been around the topic thoroughly, I would say, and
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed talking to you, Beverly.
Absolutely.
Here
Always a
at the end,
pleasure.
sort of cool us down a bit, even though we're already jumping into this topic. I sort of want to ask you, what is the next tattoo you have planned?
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna stick to these small, colorful tattoos on the outside of
Mm.
my legs. I was sticking to a theme of like ocean animals,
Mm.
fish, and I got like an octopus and a jellyfish, and oh, I got a blue lobster. Um, but there's also some like land creatures I want. Like I'm really
Yeah,
into, reptiles and exotic pets. I
I
have
know.
tarantulas,
Yeah,
beetles.
don't bring the tarantula out.
Oh yeah, I
Not for
remember.
me.
Yeah, you have
I'm,
your
a-
spider
I'm
fear.
okay with some spiders now, but when it comes to big spiders, I will freeze.
Yeah, so I might want to get, a few, like a scorpion or something like the
Yeah.
Queercation conference had the theme of a scorpion.
All
And so
right.
had those people been getting it, we weren't
You would have,
actually doing
no, I
tattoos.
know that
Yeah.
feeling. Like if I'd been to the inked up, marked out conference and they were doing on the skin, I might actually have gotten one as
Yeah.
well. But we
Yeah,
were
that
just
would have been
doing
a
fake
fun
skin.
one.
But there was a person that suggested we should all get them on our actual skin.
Yeah, right. No.
Nobody went for it, but it was funny. But
Yeah,
I mean,
but yeah,
from
just small, like colorful, and I would love to get them
uh,
like in Asia, in
oh
Korea,
yeah, yeah.
that kind
Oh
of
yeah,
stuff.
Korea would be great. Korea or Japan have some of the best tattoo artists I've ever seen. Taiwan
Yeah,
as well has some amazing
Taiwan,
tattoo artists.
China. I did get one in Hong Kong too.
All right, nice. They have
Yeah,
good ones
that
too.
was Yeah, and they're holding up well. I mean, I obviously my legs never ever see the light of day, so that's
No,
easy
and you
to
deal
keep
with heat
covered.
better, so you're better at protecting them. See, I go
Yeah,
into full-on tank top mode as soon as we hit
yeah,
20
never.
degrees Celsius, which is just like 70, 75 Fahrenheit. So I
Yeah, I have to
heavily,
cover
I'm
always.
a heavy advocate for sunscreen if you're as pale
Yes,
as me.
me too. Absolutely.
Even if you're not, but especially if you're like me and don't handle heat, always have sunscreen and hat to protect your
Yeah,
tattoos.
absolutely.
But for
Definitely
me personally,
sleeves.
to answer the question myself as well, I'm just planning on filling out the rest of this arm because there's some big
Oh,
bare spots that I
yeah.
really wanna. Can't handle that. I hate looking at my right arm because
Oh,
there's
there you
these
go.
bare
You got
spots.
an elbow still left.
Oh yeah, both sides of it. So that's gonna be fun.
Yeah. You have your other elbow though.
Yeah, that's already
Yeah,
been taken
elbows
care of
are
fully.
fun.
I don't do the cop out of leaving the elbow out. I know some
Oh
people
no.
do that.
Yeah.
Some people see it as the old school way. No, no, I don't care how it heals. Cover that
Yeah.
sucker.
Yep. Sleeve.
Gotta
Full.
be a full sleeve. A
Yep.
full sleeve.
Absolutely.
On that note, Beverly, first of all, I gotta thank you for coming on. I know I also went on your thing, but it's awesome to get to know you, and I've loved this relationship we've built over the
Yeah,
last few years.
absolutely.
It's fun to have somebody go from somebody you idolize and reference in work to somebody you talk to, you know.
Yeah.
And I really happy to have had you on. Please let people know where they can find you and more of what you do, and I'll be sure also to link your YouTube channel and your Instagram on the
Yeah,
video.
absolutely. Sounds great. Yeah, you can find me at Snake Girl Sociology on YouTube, and I'm doing a lot more sociology content, but interviewing folks that are tattoo authors and also the queer tattoo artists as well. So I have some tattoo content coming forth.
And do also, if you're curious about learning more of tattoo sociology and just social science and tattoos, check out some of Beverly's work. She's got published journal articles, and
Yeah,
especially the book we showed earlier, Covered
yeah,
in Ink. That's an incredible book, especially for anybody interested in female and non-male identity and tattoos. I would say it's quite a great book still to this day to have a read
yeah.
in. And again, for anybody listening in, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Beverly Yuen Thompson. I'm so happy to have her on. She went from being somebody I referenced in my work throughout my academic career to being somebody that's still an idol of mine, but also a great friend. And she has so much to teach and is herself also, as you can see, an avid tattoo lover, just like myself and many of you watching or listening out there. But next time, I promise, we are moving away from sociology for a little bit. This show will, of course, always involve some sociology. I am, after all, the one hosting it. But we're not going to talk to sociologists next time. Instead, we're going to be talking about conventions. Tattoo conventions specifically, of course, duh. But we're going to do this with a very special guest of mine who actually, fun story, also invited himself onto this show, sort of. But I couldn't be happier that he came on. It's going to be the creator and host, the man running the show of the Scottish Tattoo Convention, one of my personal favorite conventions I've ever been to. And we're going to be talking about both that convention, also what it actually takes to run a good convention, especially a long-running convention these days, and how you make a convention something that everybody can enjoy, both the tattoo enthusiasts out there, where we all come there and think it's a great family gathering almost. We come there and hang out with other people we may only see in the convention scene and who we might not have seen for some time. And for the newbies, people that love tattoos and have never been to a convention, or even people that are just curious about who are all these strange people who love tattoos so much and go there and just have a nice family outing or whatever. But that's all for the next episode, which will also be the first episode of round 7 of the podcast. We've just finished off round 6, and I'm happy to say that it is so far going very well, and I enjoy this journey with all you guys. So I'll see you next time.